My name is Emma, I'm 42, and I came home from surgery to find my sister sleeping with my husband in our bed. Before I tell you how I exposed their disgusting, calculated plan in front of my entire family and took back everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The silence was the first thing I noticed. It was a deep, unnatural quiet that felt wrong in my bones. After being discharged from the hospital a day ahead of schedule, weak and sore from an appendectomy, I expected to walk into some semblance of life. The low hum of the TV, maybe the sound of David, my husband, on a work call. He was supposed to be working from home to take care of me. My younger sister, Melissa, who had been our house guest for 6 long months, was supposed to be out pounding the pavement, looking for a job. But the apartment was utterly still. It was the heavy, breathless silence of a held breath, and it made the fine hairs on my arms prickle with a sudden, cold dread. I set my small overnight bag down by the door, my movements feeling sluggish and clumsy. The dull throb in my side was a familiar ache, but a new, sharper pain was beginning to bloom in my chest, a tight knot of anxiety. I didn't call out their names. Some primal instinct warned me against it, a feeling that shouting into this oppressive quiet would shatter something fragile and irreversible. I moved down the hallway, my hospital-issued slippers whispering against the polished hardwood floors. Our bedroom door, which I always kept wide open to let the light in, was closed almost all the way, just a thin sliver of darkness remaining. As I drew closer, I heard it. A soft murmur, a sound I couldn't quite place, followed by a low, throaty laugh. It was Melissa's laugh. The one our parents always described as tinkling, like a set of delicate wind chimes. But hearing it now, from behind my bedroom door, it sounded like shattering glass. My blood ran cold, a glacial sludge in my veins. My hand felt disconnected from my body as I reached out and pushed the door open. And there they were. In my bed. In the big, 4-poster bed David and I had spent a whole weekend assembling 5 years ago, laughing and fighting over the instructions. The crisp, clean sheets I had put on just before I went into the hospital were a tangled, chaotic mess around their bodies. They didn't see me at first. They were lost in their own sordid little world, David's head buried in the crook of Melissa's neck, her fingers tangled in his hair. The betrayal was so absolute, so visually obscene, that it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It wasn't just my husband of 10 years. It was my own sister. The sister I'd taken in without question when she'd lost her job and had nowhere else to go. The sister whose bills I had been paying. The sister who ate my food and wore my old sweaters. My first impulse wasn't to scream or to throw something. It was a strange, terrifying calm, a sensation of floating outside my own body. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside my brain, shutting down all emotion to prevent a catastrophic overload. I noticed the way the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I saw the pile of David's work clothes slung over the armchair in the corner. I saw Melissa's cheap, trendy jeans pulled on the floor next to my side of the bed. Then, David shifted, lifting his head. His eyes, hazy with pleasure, met mine over Melissa's bare shoulder. The change was instantaneous. Panic, pure and undiluted, wiped the lazy satisfaction from his face. He froze like a startled animal, his mouth falling open, a silent O of disbelief. Melissa, feeling him go rigid, turned her head, a questioning look on her face. Her expression morphed from contentment to wide-eyed horror in a split second. "Emma," she breathed, her voice a guilty whisper as she scrambled to pull the sheet up to her chin. I said nothing. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch and thicken, letting them choke on it. I wanted them to see my face. I wanted them to memorize the blank, dead-eyed stare of the woman whose life they had just detonated. I held their gazes for 5, 10, 15 seconds. An eternity. Then, with a deliberation that felt foreign to me, I turned around and walked away. I heard a frantic scramble behind me, a cacophony of rustling sheets and panicked whispers. David yelled my name, his voice cracking. "Emma, wait! It's not what it looks like." The sheer, insulting stupidity of that cliché almost made me laugh. I didn't stop. I walked back down the hall, picked up my overnight bag, opened the front door, and stepped out into the hallway of the apartment building. I closed the door gently behind me. The soft click of the latch sliding into place was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of my old life ending. It was the sound of a door closing on the woman I used to be. I somehow made it down to my car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. When the engine finally turned over, I just drove. I had no destination. The city became a blur of traffic lights and storefronts, a smear of concrete and glass that I saw but didn't register. My mind was a frantic, looping slideshow of memories, each one now recontextualized, poisoned by the scene I had just witnessed. The phone call from my mother 6 months ago played in my head on a torturous loop. "Emma, honey, you have that big spare room, and it's just sitting empty," she'd said, her voice dripping with that special brand of maternal guilt she had perfected over the years. "Melissa lost her job, the poor thing. She has nowhere else to go. She's your sister. Family has to be there for each other. You're the responsible one, you've always been so capable." And I, the ever-dutiful daughter, the responsible one, had caved. Despite having a demanding job in marketing that often required long hours, despite paying the lion's share of the mortgage on the apartment David and I shared, I had said yes. Because that's what I did. I fixed things. I took care of people. Then there was the memory of a family dinner just a few weeks prior. I'd just received a major promotion at work, a huge milestone I had been working towards for years. I was now a senior director, with a significant salary increase. But did we celebrate my success? No. My parents, with David nodding along enthusiastically, spent the entire dinner gushing about how resilient Melissa was. "She's using this time off to really find her creative side," my mother had cooed. "She's thinking of starting a blog. She's got a real spark," that one, David had added, giving Melissa's arm a squeeze that lasted just a second too long. I'd felt a prickle of irritation then, a familiar feeling of being overlooked, of being the sturdy, boring foundation upon which the more interesting members of my family could stand. Now, that memory felt sinister. Their shared glances, their inside jokes that I was never privy to, it had all been happening right in front of me. I had paid for the very food on the table where they had silently mocked me. My sacrifices paraded through my mind. I'd used the bulk of a small inheritance from my grandmother to make a larger payment on our mortgage, an investment I thought David and I were making in our future together. I'd worked late nights to cover our bills when David's freelance graphic design work was in a lull. I'd hosted every Thanksgiving and Christmas, planning and cooking for days, because Melissa was too stressed with the job hunt and David was just not a planner. I was the bedrock. The dependable, reliable, boring bedrock they had built their secret, sordid little world on top of. And they had just dynamited the foundations. The dull ache in my side from the surgery had escalated into a raging fire, but the emotional agony was a physical weight, a crushing pressure on my chest that made it impossible to breathe. I swerved into the parking lot of a deserted strip mall, the tires crunching on loose gravel. I slammed the car into park, and finally, the unnatural calm that had enveloped me shattered into a million pieces. A sob ripped through me, a raw, animal sound of pure pain. I slumped over the steering wheel, my forehead pressing against the hard plastic, and I wept. I wept for the woman who was so desperate to be a good daughter, a good wife, a good sister, that she never stopped to ask if they were good to her. I wept for my own willful blindness. I wept until my throat was raw, my eyes were swollen shut, and there were simply no tears left. When it was over, there was only a hollow, echoing emptiness. The rage was gone. The grief was gone. In their place was something new. Something hard, and cold, and terrifyingly clear. It was resolve. I pushed myself upright, wiped my tear-streaked face with the back of my hand, and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were puffy and red, but they weren't weak. They were flinty. They were done. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Then I picked up my phone. My hands were steady now. I had one call to make. Olivia? I said, my voice raspy but firm. It's me. Something's happened. There was a brief pause on the other end. Olivia, my best friend since we were college roommates, a shark of a divorce lawyer, and the most fiercely loyal person I knew. Emma? You sound awful. Are you okay? Where are you? I will be, I said, and the certainty in my own voice surprised me. But I need a place to stay. And I need a lawyer. My door is always open, you know that, she said, her tone shifting seamlessly from concerned friend to focused professional. Get over here. Don't go back to the apartment. Don't talk to them. Just come here. We'll figure this out. The right way. Walking into Olivia's sleek, minimalist apartment on the other side of town felt like stepping through a portal into another reality. It was clean, organized, and blessedly calm, everything my life was not. She took one look at my ravaged face, pulled me into a fierce hug that said everything words couldn't, and then steered me towards her plush sofa. She handed me a glass of water and 2 ibuprofen without a word. First, you rest, she said, her voice soft but firm. You've had a major shock on top of major surgery. Tomorrow, we go to war. I slept on her comfortable guest bed for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure physical and emotional exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through the window. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel the immediate, pressing weight of anyone else's needs or expectations. There was only one thing on my mind, taking back control. Olivia was already at her kitchen island, her laptop open, 2 steaming mugs of coffee waiting. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of sympathy and steel. Ready? I nodded, taking a sip of the strong, black coffee. It felt like pouring fuel on the cold fire in my belly. Ready. Okay, she said, turning her laptop towards me. Here's the battle plan. We act fast, and we act decisively. Before David has a chance to spin his narrative, manipulate you, or move any assets. The first thing we do is build a financial fortress around you. This isn't about revenge, Emma. This is about strategy. For the next hour, Olivia, my brilliant lawyer friend, walked me through it. She laid out a series of precise, legal steps designed to protect me and neutralize them. My first call was to my company's HR department. I was surprised by how steady and professional my voice sounded. Good morning, this is Emma Lawson. I need to update my direct deposit information, effective immediately. I read off the account number for a new personal checking account Olivia had helped me open online just moments before. My next salary payment, a significant one thanks to my recent promotion, would not be landing in the joint account David had access to. That was the first brick in my new fortress. Step 2 was a series of calls to our financial institutions. With Olivia coaching me on the exact terminology, I called the customer service line for our shared credit cards. I'm reporting my cards as lost or stolen, I said, the lie feeling like a small taste of justice. I requested the account be frozen and a new card issued only to me, sent to a new address, Olivia's address. Next, the bank. I would like to place a withdrawal limit of $1 on our joint savings account, pending a legal separation agreement. The representative was polite and efficient. Within 20 minutes, David's financial access to me was severed. He was on his own. Step 3 was the most symbolic, the most satisfying. I found a 24-hour locksmith online. I need an emergency lock change at my apartment, I told the man on the phone. My keys were stolen. We arranged to meet at noon. I knew David had a lunch meeting with a potential client he was trying to impress. And Melissa, in her infinite laziness, usually went to a spin class around that time, a membership I was paying for. As I drove to the apartment, a cold sense of purpose settled over me. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a contaminated space, a crime scene. When I arrived, the locksmith, a burly man with kind eyes, was already waiting. As he worked, drilling out the old locks with a loud, whining noise that sounded like liberation, I went inside for the last time. I walked through the silent rooms, a ghost in my own life. I went straight to the master bedroom. The bed was hastily made, a pathetic attempt to erase their sin, but I could still smell the cloying scent of Melissa's perfume on the pillows. A wave of nausea hit me, but I swallowed it down. There was work to do. I pulled 2 large suitcases from the top of the closet. Methodically, clinically, I began to pack their things. I packed David's expensive shirts, his collection of graphic novels, his laptop and all its cables. As I packed his things, I found a framed photo on his nightstand, a picture of us on our wedding day. I looked at the smiling, hopeful woman in the photo and felt a pang of pity for her. I took the photo out of the frame, tore it neatly in half, and dropped it into the trash. Then I moved on to Melissa's belongings. Her cheap, trendy outfits, many of which she had borrowed from me and never returned. Her extensive collection of makeup. The pile of vapid self-help books she'd bought with my money. I didn't throw things. I didn't rip anything. I folded each item neatly. It was a detached, surgical process. With each folded shirt, I was folding away a piece of my past, putting it away for good. I found the tablet David used for his design work sitting on the nightstand, charging. He must have forgotten it in his haste to chase after me. On a whim, I unplugged it and packed it into his bag. It was petty, but I didn't care. He wouldn't be needing it for any work he was doing for me. When I was done, I dragged the 2 heavy suitcases to the front door. The locksmith had just finished installing the new, high-security deadbolt. He handed me a set of 3 shiny, new keys. They felt heavy and powerful in my palm. "All set, ma'am," he said. "No one's getting through that without one of these." I paid him, thanking him for his quick work. After he left, I stood in the empty hallway for a moment. I opened the door one last time, pushed their suitcases out onto the welcome mat, and then closed and locked it from the inside. The solid, satisfying thunk of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Back at Olivia's apartment, my phone, which I had left on silent, began to light up. First, a string of increasingly frantic texts from David. "Emma, where are you? We need to talk about this. Seriously, answer your phone. My key isn't working. What the hell is going on? Did you change the locks?" Then came the calls, one after another, his name flashing on the screen. I watched it ring, a small, vicious thrill running through me. I let it go to voicemail every time. Around 5 p.m., a new number called. My mother. I knew I had to take this one. I braced myself, took a deep breath, and hit accept. "Emma, what is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice a high-pitched nail on a chalkboard. There was no hello, no how are you feeling after your surgery. Just pure, undiluted accusation. "Melissa just called me, she's in tears. You threw her out on the street. Her and David. How could you be so heartless?" I listened to her tirade, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. Every ounce of her concern was for Melissa. The golden child. The perpetual victim. Not a single question about whether I was okay. Not a single flicker of curiosity about what might have prompted such a drastic action from her ever-reliable, ever-placid older daughter. "I'm not discussing this with you right now, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Not discussing it? Your sister has nowhere to go. She's standing on the sidewalk with her suitcases. After everything we've taught you about the importance of family. What have you taught me about family?" I interrupted, the ice in my voice cracking with a sudden, sharp anger. That it's my job to clean up everyone else's messes? That I'm supposed to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm? That my home is a free hotel and my bank account is a public fund? My decision is final. You're being selfish and vindictive, Emma. This isn't like you. "You're right," I said, and a profound sense of clarity washed over me, silencing the last vestiges of guilt. It isn't. The old Emma is gone. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. This conversation is over. I hung up before she could sputter another word. Then, systematically, I blocked her number. I blocked my father's. I blocked Melissa's. And I blocked David's. The silence that followed was blissful. It was the silence of freedom. But as I sat there, staring at my dark phone screen, a nagging feeling returned. This was too easy. Their brazenness, their comfort in my home, it felt like more than just a passionate fling. It felt like they believed they had a right to be there, a right to my life. I just didn't have the proof. Yet. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork. Olivia was my anchor, guiding me through the initial, bewildering steps of filing for divorce. She was the perfect combination of compassionate friend and ruthless lawyer. We need to document everything, Emma, she insisted one evening, as we sat surrounded by bank statements. Every asset, every debt. We need a full, undeniable financial picture before he has a chance to hide anything. That's what led me back to the tablet. A few nights later, while Olivia was out for a late run, I pulled David's tablet from the bag of his things I'd stored in the corner of the guest room. I told myself I was just being thorough, looking for financial documents I might have missed, anything that might be relevant to the divorce proceedings. But a deeper, darker curiosity was gnawing at me. I needed to understand the scope of their deception. I powered it on. The password screen glowed in the dim light. My heart sank. It could be anything. I tried his birthday. Password incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Password incorrect. I tried the name of our cat. Nothing. Then, a bitter, cynical thought wormed its way into my mind. With trembling fingers, I typed in Melissa's birthday. MMDDYY. It unlocked. A wave of hot, acidic sickness washed over me. Of course. Of course, his password was a tribute to her. The sheer, blatant disrespect of it stole my breath. I felt like a fool, a naive, trusting fool, all over again. Swallowing my disgust, I started searching. I opened his files. It was mostly work stuff, just as I'd seen before, design mock-ups, client emails. I checked his photo gallery. It was squeaky clean, just pictures of landscapes and our cat. They were smart. They hadn't left an obvious, messy trail. I was about to give up, feeling defeated, when Olivia's voice echoed in my head. People are lazy. They think they're clever, but they always leave a trace. Check the places they forget about, the trash, the archives, the drafts. I opened his cloud storage drive, which was still synced to the device. I meticulously checked the trash folder. Nothing. I checked the archives. Empty. My heart began to sink. Then I saw a folder labeled simply Drafts. It was mostly half-finished, unsent emails to clients. But as I scrolled to the bottom, one file, created several months ago, caught my eye. It had a strange, innocuous name, The Plan. My fingers trembled as I tapped on it. It wasn't an email. It was a note. A long, detailed, horrifying note. It was a timeline. And as I read it, the floor didn't just drop out from under me, the entire building collapsed. It was all there, in cold, hard, black and white. A meticulously crafted plan, written by David, for Melissa. It detailed how they would orchestrate her moving in with us. It talked about how he would encourage me to use the windfall from my grandmother's inheritance to pay off the remaining mortgage on the apartment. The note was chillingly specific, a roadmap to my financial ruin. Just have to be patient for another 6 months, babe, one line read. Once she pays off the house with the inheritance money, it's fully a marital asset, free and clear. We file for divorce then. With her big new promotion and salary, and my struggling artist act, the judge will have no choice but to award me half the value of the home. We'll force a sale, split the money, and we can finally get that little place by the coast. Another section detailed how Melissa should play the part of the supportive, struggling sister to keep me from getting suspicious. Just keep telling her how grateful you are, how you don't know what you'd do without her. She eats that stuff up. She's so focused on being the responsible one, she'll never see it coming. I had to read it 3 times, my eyes scanning the words over and over, before my brain could fully process the sheer, calculated evil of it. This wasn't just a betrayal. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long con. This was conspiracy to commit fraud. They hadn't just cheated on me, they had been actively plotting to strip me of my home, my savings, and my inheritance. My kindness, my sense of family duty, my generosity, they had seen it all as a fundamental character flaw, a weakness to be systematically exploited for their own gain. The feeling in my gut wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was a cold, pure, diamond-hard fury unlike anything I had ever known. This document. This was everything. This was the truth. This was my weapon. With a hand that was now perfectly steady, I connected the tablet to Olivia's wireless printer. I printed 2 copies of the entire multi-page note. Then, for good measure, I took clear, high-resolution pictures of the screen with my phone. I held the printed pages in my hand, the paper still warm from the printer. This was my proof. This was my power. And I knew exactly when, and where, I was going to detonate it. A week later, the call I had been waiting for came. It was my father. I had unblocked his number, anticipating this exact move. His voice was different this time. Not shrieking with anger, but heavy with a paternal, condescending disappointment that was somehow even more infuriating. "Emma," he said, his voice a low sigh. "Your mother and we've been talking. We think this has gone on long enough. This silence, this fighting, it's tearing the family apart. We need to sit down, as a family, and talk this through. All of us. This Sunday, at our house. For dinner." I could hear the unspoken words hanging in the air like a thick fog. This is your chance to apologize. This is your chance to be the bigger person and fix the mess you made. They were summoning me to a tribunal, a kangaroo court where I would be the one on trial. They wanted to use the immense, suffocating weight of family to crush me into submission, to make me forgive and forget so they could all go back to their comfortable, dysfunctional normal. "Okay, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly even, betraying none of the triumphant rage singing in my veins. "I'll be there." He sounded audibly relieved. "Good. That's my girl. We'll see you at 6. He had no idea what was coming. They thought they were setting a trap for me. In reality, they were building my stage. I spent the rest of the week preparing for my performance with Olivia. We went over every detail, every possible contingency. She role-played as my mother, as David, throwing every possible accusation at me. She coached me on what to say, how to present my evidence, and most importantly, how to maintain my composure. "They will try to provoke you, Emma," she warned me, her eyes serious. "They want you to scream, to cry, to get emotional. That's how they'll dismiss you as hysterical and irrational. You cannot give them that satisfaction. You are not a victim pleading her case. You are a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Be a surgeon. Cold, precise, and lethal." On Sunday, I chose my armor carefully. A simple, impeccably tailored navy blue sheath dress. Professional. Unimpeachable. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, severe bun at the nape of my neck. I did my makeup with a steady hand, a touch of dark eyeliner to make my eyes look sharp, a neutral lipstick that meant business. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who was in complete and utter control. In my leather portfolio, I had 2 sets of documents, each in its own clear plastic sleeve. The first was a small collection of tasteful but undeniable photos of David and Melissa together, kissing at a restaurant, holding hands in a park, all dated months before she had supposedly lost her job, all sent to me by a mutual friend who could no longer stomach their public displays of disrespect. The second document was the multi-page, printed-out copy of the plan. I walked up to my parents' manicured front lawn, up the familiar brick walkway, and rang the bell. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my face was a mask of serene calm. My dad opened the door, a pained, practiced smile on his face. "Emma. Glad you could make it. Come in." I stepped into the lion's den. The scene was exactly as I'd pictured it. My mother, David, and Melissa were all arranged in the formal living room, a space reserved for important occasions. They were seated on the plush sofas like a panel of judges, their faces arranged in somber, serious expressions. It was so transparently staged it was almost comical. I didn't join them on the sofas. I remained standing, my portfolio held loosely at my side. My father cleared his throat, taking his seat in his favorite armchair, the head of the family throne. "All right," he began, steepling his fingers. "We're all here because this situation has gotten out of hand. We need to resolve this. Emma, we know you're hurt. We understand that. But the way you acted, throwing your sister out on the street, freezing David out of his own home and bank account, it was an extreme reaction. It was cruel." On cue, Melissa began to sniffle, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a crumpled tissue. "I never, ever meant to hurt you, Emma," she whispered, her voice thick with fake emotion. "I know the timing was terrible. But David and I, we couldn't help it. We just fell in love. Our feelings are real." David nodded gravely, his face a mask of pained sincerity. "I take full responsibility, Emma. I was a coward. I should have told you sooner. But I love your sister. And I want to make this divorce as amicable as possible, for everyone's sake." I let them finish their pathetic, pre-rehearsed performance. I let the silence hang in the air. They all looked at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and expectation, waiting for my tears, my anger, my inevitable apology. I gave them none of it. Slowly, deliberately, I walked over to the large oak coffee table in the center of the room. I placed my portfolio down on the polished wood. The soft sound seemed to echo in the tense silence. "Love," I said, my voice low and clear, cutting through the thick atmosphere like a shard of ice. "Is that what you're calling it?" I opened the portfolio and slid the first plastic sleeve, the one with the photographs, across the table towards my parents. "This love of yours seems to have started long before you were living in my house, Melissa," I said, my eyes locked on her. I watched as her face crumpled, the fake tears turning into real ones of panic. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face went pale, his paternal confidence beginning to crumble. David started to bluster, his voice rising. "Now, Emma, those photos can be taken out of context. We were just friends then." "Oh, I don't think so," I said, cutting him off with a sharp, dismissive wave of my hand. "But you're right. Let's talk about context. Let's talk about something much more important than a cheap, sordid affair." I reached into the portfolio again. This time, I pulled out the second document. The pages of the plan. "Let's talk about this," I said, fanning the pages out on the table like a winning poker hand. "I believe you called it the plan, David." I watched their faces as the title registered. It was a beautiful, terrible sight. The blood drained from David's face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. Melissa looked like she was going to be physically ill, her hand clamped over her mouth. I picked up the first page, my movements calm and measured. "I'm sure my parents would be very interested to hear about your detailed financial plan," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, hard clarity that I didn't know I possessed. "The one where you decided to wait for me to pay off the mortgage on my apartment. The apartment I paid for with my salary, for my promotion, and with my grandmother's inheritance." I looked directly at my parents, who were staring at the documents, horrified and confused. And then, once the asset was clear of all debt, you planned to file for divorce. You planned to take me to court, claiming you were a struggling artist, and use community property laws to demand half of everything I had worked my entire adult life for. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a near whisper, and read a line directly from David's own treacherous words. She's so focused on being the responsible one, she'll never see it coming. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of utter, catastrophic devastation. My parents stared, horrified, not at me, but at the two people they had so staunchly and blindly defended. The masks had been ripped away, and the ugly, greedy, monstrous truth was laid bare for all of them to see. David, in a last, desperate, idiotic act of pure panic, lunged across the coffee table, trying to snatch the papers from my hand. "Give me that," he snarled, his face contorted in a mask of rage and fear. It was a clumsy, violent movement that sent a crystal glass of water crashing to the floor, shattering on the hardwood. My father, jolted from his stupor, shot up from his seat. "David! Stop it! Get a hold of yourself!" I didn't even flinch. I simply took a half-step back, holding the papers out of his reach, letting his aggression and desperation condemn him completely. I looked at my stunned, speechless parents. "This," I said, my voice calm as I gestured to the pathetic, scrambling man on the floor, "is the man you wanted me to reconcile with. This is the family you were so desperate to preserve." I turned, leaving the damning evidence spread out on the table. Without another word, I walked towards the front door. No one tried to stop me this time. As my hand closed on the doorknob, I heard my mother's voice, no longer shrieking, but a broken, horrified whisper. "Melissa, how could you?" It was no longer a question of my cruelty. It was a question of theirs. I had not just won an argument. I had shattered their entire false reality. I closed the door behind me and walked out into the cool evening air, breathing freely for the first time in years. The drive back to Olivia's was quiet. There was no triumphant fist pumping. There was no rage, no tears. Just a profound, bone-deep sense of release. The immense weight I had carried on my shoulders for my entire life was finally, blessedly, gone. The divorce was swift. With Olivia's ruthless expertise and the undeniable, documented proof of conspiracy to commit fraud, David had no leg to stand on. He didn't get half the apartment. He didn't get a penny of my inheritance or my savings. He walked away with his suitcases of clothes and a mountain of legal debt from his own failed lawyer. The apartment, my apartment, remained mine, free and clear. My relationship with my family was fractured, perhaps permanently. My final communication with them wasn't a tearful confrontation, but a short, clear email I sent to my parents a week after the disastrous dinner. "I need space and time to heal from the profound damage that has been done," I wrote. "The trust one had has been completely destroyed. I will reach out when, and if, I am ready. Please respect my boundary." For the first time, I had set a boundary they could not cross, because I was the one holding all the power. I decided to sell the apartment. There were too many ghosts, too many painful memories etched into the very walls. I sold it, made a tidy profit in the seller's market, and bought a smaller, brighter condo in a different part of the city. It had a balcony that overlooked a park, and it was a place that was entirely, unequivocally mine. Filled with my things, my peace, my future. Healing wasn't a straight line. There were days of simmering anger, and days of deep, aching sadness for the family I thought I had. On Olivia's advice, I started going to a support group for people navigating difficult, high-conflict divorces. It was there, in a circle of mismatched folding chairs in a community center basement, over cups of stale coffee, that I learned I wasn't alone. It was there I learned that my story, while uniquely painful, was a story of strength. And it was there, a few months later, that I met James. He wasn't a knight in shining armor who rode in to save me. He was a quiet, kind architect with a gentle smile and sad eyes that held his own story of betrayal. We started talking after a meeting one night, bonding over the shared, absurd details of our legal battles. He listened to my story not with pity, but with a deep, validating empathy. And for the first time, I felt safe enough to listen to his. Our first date was coffee on a Saturday morning. We talked for 3 hours. It was easy, natural. He didn't try to fix me or save me. He just saw me. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt seen for who I was, not for what I could provide for someone else. It's been a year now since that awful day. My life is quiet, and it is beautiful. My work is thriving. Without the constant drain of my family's drama, I have more energy and creativity than ever before. My small balcony is now a lush garden of herbs. The smell of fresh basil and rosemary fills my kitchen when I cook for myself, or sometimes, for James. We are taking things slow, building something real, something based on mutual respect, honesty, and a shared understanding of how precious a peaceful life can be. Last week, we were helping out at a community garden near my condo, planting new spring bulbs. As my hands dug into the cool, dark, rich earth, I thought about the journey. The woman who stood in that doorway, shattered and silent, felt like a person from another lifetime. That silence, I realized now, wasn't weakness. It was the moment I stopped listening to the deafening noise of everyone else's demands and finally started listening to the quiet, persistent whisper of my own self-worth. It was the space I needed to gather my strength. Justice, for me, wasn't a loud, fiery explosion of revenge. It was the quiet, steady, deliberate act of rebuilding a life on my own terms. It was the solid thunk of a new deadbolt, the satisfying click of a block button on my phone, and the peaceful, silent growth of a new garden. My garden. Planted and watered by my own hands. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it helps someone out there who feels invisible, taken for granted, or trapped. My question for you all is this: have you ever had a moment that forced you to completely start over, and what was the first step you took to reclaim your life? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more.